I was lying there in my hospital bed having just gone through a coronary angiogram, and my chest felt like someone had dropped a heavy slab of iron right on top of me. Just then my phone buzzed. It was a message from my son Jason. "Mom, the mortgage is $1,500 this month. Don't forget to transfer it to my account before the 10th. A wave of dizziness swept over me and I nearly lost grip of my phone. I could barely sit up straight, and here he was, not even asking how I was doing. Not one word about my health, only about the money as always. My son bleeding me dry like some parasite. I couldn't help but wonder if I should even keep him in my life anymore. I was so exhausted from living like this. The hospital room smelled sharply of disinfectant, and after finishing a round of tests, I felt completely drained, like my body had been hollowed out. The words on the screen cut through me like a scalpel. "Mom, we're just starting out and money's tight. Could you help us out for 3 years? Just 3. We'll definitely pay you back once we get on our feet." That was the same song Jason and his wife, Brittany, sang when they first asked for my help. They had just bought their new house. $1,500 a month in mortgage payments. The plan had been simple. I'd cover them for 3 years and after that they'd take over. But those 3 years stretched into 5. My monthly pension barely reached $2,000 and carrying their mortgage was suffocating me. I had drained every last penny of my savings. To survive, I secretly picked up a part-time job with a janitorial service, scrubbing floors, cleaning toilets. Anything they gave me. I never told a soul, too ashamed to admit it. What kind of son had I raised? His mother lying in a hospital bed and all he could think about was his next payment. What was I even doing this for? Brittany used to lay it on thick with her sweet words. "Barbara, you're the best mom in the world. Jason's your son. If you don't help him, who will? We'll pay you back, we promise." Pay me back? At this rate, I might not live long enough to ever see that day. My grip on the phone tightened until I almost cracked it, my fingers going numb. A wave of nausea surged through me and I turned my head, breathing deeply to steady myself. Not long after, the door creaked open. Jason and Brittany finally decided to visit. Brittany was holding a small plastic bag of apples, the kind that looked like they came straight from the discount bin. The first thing out of her mouth was a complaint. "The parking here is ridiculous. $5 for just half an hour." Jason walked over and gave me a quick, almost forced, "Hey Mom, you feeling better?" Before I could respond, he went straight to business. "Did you get the mortgage money ready? Don't let it be late." Brittany chimed in. "Yeah, Barbara, things are really tight for us too. Liam's preschool just raised their rates." She paused before adding, "But your insurance should cover most of this, right?" Translation: handle your own bills. Don't expect a dime from us. I looked at them, my heart sinking lower than ever. Brittany kept going, "Barbara, you really need to recover quickly. We're so busy with work and Liam needs me at home. We can't be here all the time." The message was loud and clear. Don't expect care, don't expect company. Just get well enough to keep being their personal ATM. Jason added, "Mom, Brittany may sound harsh, but she really cares about you. And don't forget about the mortgage, okay? Care about me." I wasn't even fully recovered and they were already calculating my insurance payout. What a son. What a daughter-in-law. Brittany's eyes darted across the bedside table as if searching for hidden cash, while Jason barely looked up from his phone, scrolling endlessly, pretending to listen. Most people visit family in the hospital to bring comfort. They came to check if the ATM still worked. A little while after they left, Emily came by. Emily was the girl next door I'd helped years ago. She calls me her godmother, though honestly she's more family than anyone by blood. She brought a thermos filled with homemade chicken soup. "Barbara, how are you feeling? What did the doctor say?" she asked softly. She poured the soup and fed me spoonful by spoonful, tucked my blanket in and helped me lie back down. She even went out to the nurse's station to check on my care plan. When she came back, she looked at me and immediately sensed something was wrong. "Barbara, did Jason upset you again?" I forced a smile and said, "I'm fine really. Don't worry. Some things were just too humiliating to share." Emily sighed but didn't press. She always knew what Jason and Brittany were like, but she never intruded. "Barbara, you've got to speak up. If Jason's crossing the line, you can't keep swallowing it." I patted her hand. "Emily, I'm just getting old. My body's giving up. They're young. Life's hard for them too." But inside it felt like I was swallowing glass. That warm bowl of soup, compared to those sad apples and their cold words, left a bitter ache in my chest. What a cruel twist. My own son barely cared if I'd eaten, while someone unrelated worried about my every need. The doctor recommended I stay a few more days for observation, but just thinking about the rising hospital bill and Jason's cold voice, I insisted on being discharged. Jason claimed he was completely buried with work, and Brittany said there was no one available to watch Liam. Neither of them had any intention of picking me up from the hospital. In the end, it was Emily who skipped a day of her college classes to come and get me. The second I walked into the house, the kitchen felt like a freezer. No smell of food, no warmth, just cold emptiness. It felt even more lifeless than the hospital room I'd just left. Not a single call or text from Jason or Brittany to ask how I was doing. Honestly, maybe the silence was better than their empty words. I could take care of myself. Still, that hollow ache in my chest wouldn't leave me. I ran my hand across the cold countertop and opened the fridge. A few wilted lettuce leaves were all that sat inside. A house means nothing without people who fill it with love. Without them, it's just an empty shell. Barely 2 days after I got home, my body still too weak to do much, Brittany showed up unannounced, carrying Liam in her arms. The little guy was full of energy, his cheeks flushed and healthy. Brittany immediately burst into a performance of tears. "Barbara, Liam had a terrible fever a few days ago. We had to take him to the doctor twice and it cost us so much. Could you please lend us $500 to get by?" She dabbed the corners of her eyes, though no real tears came. "The doctor said he needs the best medication. We really don't have any other option. Mom, you wouldn't let your own grandson suffer, would you?" I looked at Liam's bright, cheerful face and my heart softened. He was my grandson after all. The small pension I had just received was meant to cover the mortgage, but I gritted my teeth, pulled out $500 and handed it over. The moment her fingers touched the cash, Brittany's face lit up. She threw out a few half-hearted thank yous and rushed out with Liam, not even staying long enough to drink a glass of water. That satisfied look on her face when she pocketed the money, I saw it clear as day, but I swallowed my pride anyway. That was my only income for the month. Now that I had given her the money, what was I supposed to do about the mortgage? Go beg again? To them, I wasn't a mother. I was simply a living, breathing checkbook. Because of that $500, I missed the mortgage deadline. The bank called Jason directly. Right after, he called me, and the moment I answered, he exploded. "Mom, why isn't the mortgage paid yet? The bank just called me. Are you trying to abandon us now?" His voice sounded like he was about to blow up. Brittany chimed in from the background, her voice sharp and cutting. "Barbara, what are you trying to do? This could ruin our credit score." Then, as if that wasn't enough, she dragged my long-deceased mother-in-law into it. Jason's grandma always said, "A real mother puts her son first. What you're doing now. It's just plain selfish." My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get any words out. "You know exactly where that $500 went. And you still have the nerve to guilt-trip me with the dead." My voice broke into a whisper. I'll get it covered soon." After I hung up, my hands trembled so much I couldn't even hold a glass of water. My heart clenched again, sharp pains stabbing through my chest. I stared at the photo of Helen, my late mother-in-law, hanging on the wall, bitterness rising like bile in my throat. I had spent my whole life raising a son who turned out like this, and he still thought I hadn't sacrificed enough. With my pride in tatters, I went to see Paul Whitaker, an old coworker from the hospital. He lived in one of those pre-war apartment buildings with narrow stairwells and steep climbs. By the time I reached his floor, I was practically gasping for breath. When I explained why I had come, his face flickered between pity and disbelief. Still, he lent me the money, but there was a strange tone in his voice. "Barbara, your son's almost 40. Why are you still the one handling his mortgage? Don't you think it's time you lived for yourself?" His words hit me like a slap. I forced a smile. "Yeah, it's just a little bump. It won't happen again." But inside I was bleeding. Would it really not happen again? When would this cycle ever end? The sun outside Paul's apartment was so bright it made my eyes water. Across the street, neighbors were standing in pairs and small groups, chatting in hushed tones. I couldn't hear their words, but I could feel them like tiny knives cutting through me. Didn't she retire? Why is she still borrowing money? She's old and still letting her son take advantage of her. That's just sad. I felt like a public spectacle. In the name of motherhood, I had stripped myself of everything, even my last shred of dignity was wearing thin. Once I scraped together enough to cover the mortgage, I hoped maybe I'd get a few days of peace. A few days later, I made a fresh batch of orange marmalade and thought I'd drop it off at Jason's. The moment I stepped inside, Brittany rushed over, practically glowing. "Barbara. Oh my gosh, we just saw the most amazing house." She was waving her phone like a baton, showing me pictures and layouts. "Top neighborhood, 5 minutes from Lakeview Elementary. Can you imagine Liam growing up here? He'd be Ivy League bound for sure." Her eyes sparkled with ambition, not joy. The price tag on that house was enough to make anyone's heart stop. And of course, they didn't have a dime for the down payment. Right on cue, Brittany turned to me with that same polished charm she always used. "Barbara, your old place is kind of small and outdated. Why not sell it to help us with the down payment?" She smiled sweetly like she was doing me a favor. "You could move in with us. You'd help with Liam and we'd take care of you. Win-win." Jason jumped in like they had rehearsed every line. "Yeah, Mom. It's really for Liam's future. You're always alone anyway." The chill I felt in that moment had nothing to do with the air conditioning. It was their words cutting straight through me. That little house they were so eager to discard. It was the only home I'd ever built with my late husband. The one piece of my life that still felt truly mine. Now they wanted to uproot me, squeeze the last bit of value out of me and call it care. Let's be honest. What they wanted was a full-time babysitter who wouldn't cost them a dime. Brittany shoved her phone closer, swiping through glossy real estate listings, gushing about the natural light, the open floor plan, the potential resale value. The greed on her face wasn't even disguised. But I wasn't looking at those houses. My mind was picturing my own. The curtains I'd sewn by hand, the bargain rug I vacuumed every Sunday, the creaky wooden chair I refused to toss because it still held the shape of my husband's back. To them it was all just square footage and equity. I didn't give them an answer right away, and that didn't sit well with them. They started visiting more often, always pretending it was casual, but the conversation always circled back to the same topic. One evening they even arrived with a trunk full of groceries. Brittany beamed, her voice sticky sweet. "Barbara, let's have a nice family dinner tonight. We've got something important to talk about." I knew exactly what that important thing was. Another push to sell my house. During dinner they took turns like a tag team. One minute it was about Liam's bright future, the next was pure guilt. "If you're not comfortable with this, we might not be able to bring Liam over as often," Brittany said with a little shrug. Translation: agree or say goodbye to seeing your grandson. I couldn't swallow a single bite. My chest felt like it was filled with wet concrete, so I stayed silent. Brittany leaned forward, her smile glued on like a mask. "Barbara, think of it as doing this for Liam, okay? He's your grandson. If you don't help now, he might grow up resenting you." Jason chimed in, eyes fixed anywhere but on me. "Come on, Mom. Stop being so stubborn. That old house isn't worth much anymore. Let's get something newer. We could all live together. It'd be fun." This wasn't about family, it was a shakedown. They were using Liam as a bargaining chip. Brittany gently dropped a piece of chicken into my bowl like she cared, but her words dripped with guilt and manipulation. Jason barely glanced up, only nodding whenever Brittany needed him to echo her lines. There was no warmth at that table, only strategy. Even the wine they poured me didn't taste like love. It tasted like control. The pressure had been building for weeks, and that night it finally broke me. The very next day pain hit me like a freight train, leaving me breathless. At the ER, doctors diagnosed me with acute gastritis. I was dehydrated, vomiting, too weak to even sit up. Lying there, dizzy and hollowed out, I managed to call Jason. He heard my frail voice and answered flatly, "I've got clients this week. I'll have Brittany check on you." The moment he hung up, something inside me cracked. A few hours later, Brittany showed up. The second she walked in, she wrinkled her nose. "Oh my God, what is that smell?" She tiptoed in like she was walking through a crime scene, wearing gloves, pouring me water with the cold precision of a nurse, but the attitude of a landlord inspecting property damage. For a second I almost thought she had come to care. Then she sat on the edge of my bed, her voice light and breezy. "Barbara, let's be real. You're not as strong as you used to be. Maybe it's time to start, making arrangements." She kept smiling, but her eyes kept drifting to my desk drawer. I knew exactly what she was after, the deed and the old bank passbook. Then she slipped in the question, smooth as silk. "Oh, by the way, where do you keep that old savings account? Is the password still your birthday?" You really shouldn't handle this stuff all alone. What if something happened to you? She let her words trail off, but I heard them loud and clear. Make a will, hand it all over to us. I stared at her eager face and my heart went cold. She wasn't here to help. She was here to take inventory. My body grew heavier by the minute, but my soul was already numb. From my bed, I could hear her in the kitchen clinking my dishes like she already owned the place. The drawer was still open, the papers inside crumpled from her fingers. She returned, still smiling, and said she had to leave. Liam had art class. I just nodded and let her go. Once the door closed behind her, I pulled myself out of bed and made my way to the drawer. I carefully put every document back where it belonged, one page at a time. My hands shook when I touched the deed. The corners were slightly bent. She had handled it. My eyes locked onto the line that read, Owner, Barbara Sanders. They weren't waiting for me to recover. They were waiting for me to lose all control. I didn't sleep that night. The diarrhea wouldn't stop, my stomach felt like it had been scraped raw, and even sitting up to sip water drained me. Alone, I dragged myself out of bed, my damp slippers sliding on the floor, and knelt in the bathroom to clean up the mess. Cold water soaked through my wrists and seeped all the way into my chest. The house was so quiet it almost hummed. I could hear every tick of the wall clock, each second a sharp reminder of just how long this night had dragged on. Brittany never came back. Jason never called. I sat on the toilet, staring at the stain I hadn't been able to scrub clean, and my mind wandered back over a decade. When my husband was hospitalized, bleeding out in the middle of the night, I had knelt on that cold, sterile floor, wiping up the blood with tissues, hauling half-full buckets to clean him up and change the sheets. Back then, I never thought of it as dirty or exhausting. I just did it. But now, one case of gastritis and suddenly I was a burden, nothing but dead weight. How did it come to this? Just as the sky started to lighten, I finally sat down to catch my breath. That's when the doorbell rang. It was Emily. She stood there holding a paper bag of breakfast, her brow furrowing the instant she saw me. Barbara, you don't look right. She placed the bag on the kitchen counter and walked straight over. I tugged at my collar, trying to hide the weakness in my face. It's nothing. I just ate something bad yesterday. She didn't press. 5 minutes later, she quietly came out of my bedroom holding a few papers. My prescriptions and insurance forms. She sighed and asked softly, What have they done to push you this far? I didn't answer. I simply took the papers from her and slid them into a drawer. She sat quietly in the living room while I forced down a few bites of breakfast, her eyes watching me with silent concern. After a while, she spoke gently, pulling a business card from her purse and setting it on the coffee table. Her name's Melanie. She's a lawyer I trust. Specializes in elder asset protection. I glanced at the card. The print was crisp, not a single letter out of place. I'm not trying to sue them, I said automatically. No one said you had to, Emily replied calmly. This is about protecting what's yours before they take it from you. I stayed quiet. Last night, while I was barely able to stand from pain, not one of them asked if I had medicine or even water. But they hovered over my passwords and paperwork like vultures circling a carcass. I stared at the card for a long time. Can this lawyer actually protect me? I asked. She can help you set up a trust, Emily said without hesitation. Your house, your pension, they all go in. You control who has access and who doesn't. If something happens to you, your dignity stays intact. I nodded slowly but gave no answer yet. That evening, Jason and Brittany showed up, armed with flowers and their usual performance. Brittany waltzed in all smiles. Barbara, are you feeling any better? This place could use some fresh air. Let me crack a window for you. She floated into the kitchen, chatting as she moved. Need help tidying up? Oh, and that pharmacy card I grabbed for you. Is it still over by the desk? I heard her footsteps lingering near the drawer where I kept my documents, and my stomach knotted. Jason slumped onto the couch. Hey Mom. Any chance you can still cover the mortgage this month? You said you weren't feeling well last time, but well, things are pretty tight for us. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I went into the bedroom, returned with a folded insurance statement and handed it to him. I checked with Emily. I have to pay out of pocket first. It's a little complicated right now. You two might need to figure something else out. Brittany returned from the study, her face blank. They stayed a few more minutes, said they had to pick Liam up from school, and left without eating a thing. As soon as the door shut, I walked to the table. My folder had been moved. The deed, which I'd kept tucked at the bottom, was now sitting right on top. The cover of my insurance file had fresh creases in it. I stared at that stack of papers for a good half-minute. Then I turned, sat back on the sofa and picked up my phone. "Emily," I said, my voice steady low. "I want to meet that lawyer as soon as possible." Emily was waiting for me in the car. The morning sun was soft and warm. I wrapped myself in a coat, pulled my hat low over my head, looking like I was just heading to the grocery store. But we weren't going there. We drove downtown to an old office building with no flashy signs, just a small brass plaque beside the door. Melanie Cross, Elder Law and Estate Planning. Inside, she sat behind a tidy desk, wearing thin-rimmed glasses, her face calm and composed. Not one of those aggressive, fast-talking lawyers, but someone soft-spoken and deliberate. "Miss Barbara, you're here because you want to protect your home, your assets, and your right to make decisions for yourself. Is that correct?" I nodded, my heart pounding. "Then we need to set up 3 things, she explained. "First, a revocable trust. Everything you own will go into it. Second, a healthcare proxy so medical decisions are made by someone you trust. And third, a disinheritance clause, clearly stating your son and daughter-in-law will receive nothing from your estate." She said it all plainly and I heard every word. "Once this is signed," she added, "they won't be able to touch a single cent, even if one day you can't speak for yourself." I bit my lip and looked over at Emily. She didn't say a word to convince me. Emily just gave me a quiet nod. "I don't want to take them to court," I said softly. "You don't have to," Melanie replied, sliding a pen across her desk. "You just need to make sure they never get the chance to hijack your life again." My hand trembled as I signed, but I didn't stop. The house, my retirement account, every bank account I could think of, I transferred it all into the trust. Only I knew the password to the new account. I named Emily as my backup trustee. I asked Melanie to add a clause. Beneficiaries may not transfer or reassign inheritance shares unless personally amended in writing by the grantor. She nodded and said calmly, "You're thinking clearly." As we were leaving, she handed me copies of the documents. "This isn't to scare them," she said. "It's just to make sure nothing is left to chance." The moment I got home, I changed the locks. Found a locksmith who didn't waste time. 30 minutes and it was done. I gave the only spare key to Emily. I closed the old savings account and opened a brand new one online, secured with dual passwords and fingerprint authentication. I disabled every automatic family transfer that had once been set up. My prescriptions went into a locked cabinet, and I hid the key behind an old bottle of cooking oil in the kitchen corner. Once everything was secured, I made myself a cup of tea. Same old house. Worn carpet, peeling paint, stacks of neatly folded newspapers. But for the first time I knew it belonged fully to me. As dusk settled, the doorbell rang. It was Jason and Brittany. Jason stood holding Liam, smiling, while Brittany carried a pot of soup. "Barbara, we just happened to be nearby after work and thought we'd stop in," Brittany said, her voice breezy like nothing had ever happened. "I even made your favorite chicken soup." I smiled and let them in, offered them tea, played the gracious host. Brittany glanced around, her eyes drifting from the dining table to the window, the desk, and finally landing on the drawer beside my couch. "Mom, let me tidy this up for you. You've got so many letters piled up," she chirped. Before she could take a step, I said calmly, "No need. I just organized everything." Her smile twitched for a moment. "Oh right. I think I saw something earlier. Something about a trust." I returned her stare with a cool smile. "Yes, just something I put in place. Nothing major. Just in case something happens suddenly. I don't want to leave anyone with a mess." Jason set his teacup down, his face shifting. "Mom, what exactly do you mean?" "Nothing," I answered softly. "Just making sure everything goes exactly where it should. No room for confusion." For a brief second, Brittany's composure cracked, but she quickly recovered. "Barbara, don't be like that. We only came to see you." I nodded and said gently, "Sit, relax, but don't touch my things." The air thickened like stone. They stayed barely 10 minutes before Brittany said Liam was getting restless and they left. I walked them to the door, watched them disappear down the stairs and quietly closed it behind them. Then I returned to the kitchen, picked up my knife and kept chopping vegetables while the evening news murmured from the old TV. Sunlight glinted across the sink and in that moment I knew I had finally done the right thing. Back at their house, Brittany exploded. She hurled Jason's coat onto the couch. You just sat there sipping tea. She's already moved everything into a trust and you're still playing the perfect son. Jason shut the door behind him, brow furrowed. Can you not scream in the hallway? The neighbors can hear. Brittany's face burned with rage. Do you even understand? I already spoke with a realtor. After a little renovation, her house could sell for over $400,000. I even had design plans drawn up. No. Just like that. A piece of paper, and we're not even mentioned. Jason took off his coat and sank into the couch in silence. It wasn't that he didn't care. It was that for the first time he realized this wasn't just emotions. She had really cut them out. From start to finish, I never once raised my voice. I only said, "Don't touch my things." But now he understood. That was a boundary, one I had never drawn before. The next day Jason showed up at my door alone. No call, no warning, just him. "Mom," he said, shifting uncomfortably on the porch, "I want to talk." I opened the door and let him in. This time he was quiet. He sat at the edge of the couch, hesitant. After a long pause he finally spoke. "Lately I've been thinking a lot about the past." I stayed silent and poured him a glass of warm water, placing it gently in front of him. "Do you remember when I had chickenpox as a kid? You stayed home with me for 2 weeks. You even called off your night shifts at the hospital. I still remember that vegetable soup you made." I nodded. "I remember." He gave a small, nervous smile. "I know Brittany can come off harsh. That's just how she is. And I know I've made mistakes too, but we never meant to hurt you. We've just been under a lot of pressure." I sat down across from him, my voice steady. "Did you know that the last time she visited she went through my things?" Jason's smile vanished. He opened his mouth to speak but no words came. "She thought I didn't notice," I continued. "But I saw her flipping through my property deed 3 times. She even studied the markings on the back of the folder." His head dropped and the water in his glass rippled softly. I let out a quiet sigh. "Jason, when you were a little boy with fevers, I stayed up all night placing cold towels on your forehead. As you got older, I bailed you out more times than I can count. I can handle being poor. I can handle being tired. I can even handle being unappreciated. But I won't sit back and smile while you all drain me dry." He didn't say a word. "I've placed the house in a trust," I continued. "You won't inherit a cent. After I'm gone, it'll be donated to the local women's shelter fund." There was no anger in my voice, no sadness, just clarity. A final kindness from a mother who had finally woken up. Jason stood up stiffly. "So this is revenge?" I rose too, looking him in the eye. "No. This is protection." He said nothing and walked out. The door didn't slam, but it still landed heavy in my chest. 2 days later I got a call from a friend at church. Her voice was low and hesitant. "Barbara, I don't know if I should tell you this, but Brittany's been talking to some of the old church ladies. She's saying you haven't been well, that your mental state might be slipping. She hinted the family might have to step in." I sat silently, listening as she continued. "She's asking if you've been forgetting things, if you can still cook for yourself, if anyone's been checking in on you." I gripped the phone tighter, feeling ice shoot down my spine. She had made her move, not through a will or a lawyer, but by coming after my sanity. I hung up and immediately called Melanie. "I need to add a clause," I said. "A guardianship exemption and a legal trigger. If anyone spreads claims about my mental state, I want the right to sue." Melanie paused, then asked, "Have they started?" "They've already begun," I answered. Then I made a second call, to Emily. "I need you to look into something. Brittany's been talking to people, church members, neighbors, anyone. I want everything they say to become evidence for my retaliation. I'm not waiting to be accused. They'll be the ones scrambling." That Sunday morning I made my way to the community room behind the church sanctuary, leaning on my cane. It was the weekly women's group meeting. I hadn't been in years, but when they saw me, everyone lit up. One woman offered me her seat, another handed me a cup of lemon tea just the way I like it. I smiled and chatted easily, letting the conversation flow. When the topic shifted to property taxes, I casually slipped it in. "Oh, that house. I'm donating it to the local women's shelter. Figured it's better to give women with nowhere to go a roof over their heads than to leave it to anyone in particular." Some of the ladies looked briefly surprised, then smiled warmly. "Barbara, you've always had a good heart," one said. I added just loud enough for everyone to hear, The trust is already in place. Anyone thinking they can claim it later? Too late. Laughter rippled through the room. I smiled too, knowing exactly what I was doing. The news would reach Brittany in a matter of hours. Sure enough, less than an hour after I got home, Brittany stormed through my front door. "What the hell are you doing, Barbara?" she shouted, slamming her hand on the table. Jason followed behind her, pale as a ghost. "Are you out of your mind? You're donating the entire house." I calmly set down the knife I was using and looked at them with a steady smile. "Well, you've all been acting like I was dead anyway." Brittany stomped her foot, fuming. "That's your son's inheritance. What about Liam? What happens to him?" I wiped my hands and answered evenly. "Liam? The last time you took my retirement money, you said it was for his fever medication. Meanwhile, he was bouncing on the neighbor's trampoline that same afternoon." Jason's face turned cold. "You're being unfair, Mom." "Unfair?" I snapped, tossing a copy of the property deed onto the table. "Did you think about fairness when you were sneaking into my drawer, rifling through my papers?" Brittany lunged for the document, but Emily stepped out from the hallway, holding up her phone. "I recorded everything," she said calmly. "Don't worry, every word you've said can be played back in court." Jason froze. I stepped between them, my voice quiet but sharp as a blade. "From this moment forward, you're no longer welcome in my home. I've changed the locks. The trust is now irrevocable. You won't get your hands on this house." Brittany turned pale. "You're not afraid we'll sue you?" I let out a cold laugh. "Please do. I'd love to bring the unpaid loan records, surveillance footage of you rifling through my drawers, and this audio recording to court. Let's see who should be afraid." Her mouth opened but no sound came. Jason stared at the floor. I shoved them out the front door and slammed it shut behind them as their shouting continued outside. I locked the door. Back in the kitchen, the soup was still simmering. I picked up my knife, swept the vegetables into the pot and stirred like nothing had happened. But I knew this time, they were truly out of options. Brittany didn't knock again, but on the third night the phone rang. It was Jason. "Mom, can we talk?" His voice was soft, cautious, like he was afraid I might hang up at any moment. I said nothing. I just listened. "Liam's been asking about you," Jason said softly. "He doesn't understand why you don't call anymore, why you're not picking him up. I told him you've been busy, but really, we were just too aggressive. Brittany's hot-tempered, but she's not a bad person. He's just a kid. He's innocent." As he spoke, I quietly synced the call to Emily through my Bluetooth recorder. When he finished, I gave him only one response. "Do you remember what you said in my house that day?" "I recorded it." There was a pause. "I know. I'm not trying to threaten you, I wonder if there's any way we can." "There isn't." I cut him off. "Face it, Jason." Then I hung up. The next morning, Melanie mailed a formal cease and desist letter addressed to both Jason and Brittany. The subject: Notice of legal action regarding ongoing attempt to control senior's estate. Inside, it outlines specific incidents, audio transcripts and document copies. It officially revoked their medical power of attorney and emergency contact rights and warned of immediate legal consequences for any further interference or defamation. At the next church gathering, I spoke about it publicly for the first time. I didn't mention names. I simply said that I had placed my home into an irrevocable trust because I was tired of being treated like a walking ATM while I was still alive. Some applauded. Others grew quiet. A few scooted closer and whispered, "I'm going through the same thing." They started calling me the brave one, the woman who finally stood her ground. But I wasn't looking for admiration. I had simply reached my limit. That Friday, I went to Liam's school myself and sat down with the dean. "I'm no longer his emergency contact," I said. "I won't be paying for tuition, medical bills, or anything else. He has parents. It's their turn to step up." The dean seemed surprised but nodded. "Thank you for being clear." As I left the school, I saw Brittany standing in the parking lot, pale and clutching her phone, her eyes locked on me. "Barbara," she whispered. I stopped a few steps away, stared her in the eye. "Goodbye, Brittany." She opened her mouth to speak, but I didn't wait. I turned and walked away without looking back. That evening when I arrived home, 2 notices were taped to my front door. One was the official confirmation of my property donation to the Women's Center. The other was the final trust amendment I had written in my own hand. The house would be renamed Helen Place after I pass. A shelter for women in need. I chose the name deliberately. Helen was my mother-in-law. They had used her name for years to guilt-trip me. Now her name would live on somewhere they'd never be allowed to step foot. A few days later, one of my neighbors mentioned that Jason had been quietly reassigned at work. The new HR director, apparently the younger sister of one of his old classmates, had heard the story about how he tried to pressure his elderly mother into signing over her house. He no longer handled the same client accounts. Brittany, too, had been edged out at church. Some of the women pulled me aside, whispering, "She used to say you were mentally unstable. But now everyone knows you're the clearest-headed person here." A week later, I moved out of the old house. On moving day, I didn't cry. I didn't look back. Emily helped me pack up the photo albums, took down the calendar board from the fridge, and picked the last rose from the garden. The new place wasn't big, just a modest one-bedroom apartment arranged through the women's center, but it was filled with sunlight. A wicker chair sat by the window. I settled into it with a cup of tea, watching neighborhood kids race their bikes in the breeze. This time I wasn't waiting for anyone to knock on the door. Because now I knew that door only opens for me.